This is the Atlas Emotion Series, where we share edge of the earth ideas for a new world. Hello, and welcome to another Atlas Emotion Series podcast. My name is Ella, and I am really excited today because I have a really interesting episode up ahead for us. It's called Slavery and Attachment. So I know I mentioned earlier in the year that I would focus on more uplifting topics, but this concept came to me, and I've also come to know that it's part of a 3-part series. In the first episode, which is this one, I talk about slavery and attachment, and I'll go into that concept a lot deeper soon. In the second episode, I talk about teaching. And in the third episode, it's called Stories and Storytelling. And this trio is a way for all of us to see how the heaviest parts of our lives can be transformed step by step. And ultimately, the most uplifting part of this journey is knowing it's about stories and storytelling. And for me, just this week, I've gained some immense clarity on my own feeling of purpose and my own feeling of being drawn to stories from a very young age. And that I heard that I was drawn to storytelling and being an artist because I was interested in evolving our society. And the stories that we tell ourselves are ultimately what are creating everything that we see and we experience around us. So the vitalness of being aware of our storytelling abilities and the stories we tell ourselves, it's so important. And so this is the first podcast to kick us off. And I had this concept come to me a couple of months ago. It was in the midst of my housemate and I moving moving my Corella. She's 19 years young. She's a Cockatoo, a version of a Cockatoo, from my old house to my new one. So the new one would be equivalent to moving to another country for her, because where we used to live, she basically lived there and predominantly in her cage for 19 years. And you know, I would take her out as much as I could, but she had a lot of fear, and I suppose I did too. And so I wasn't as tentative as I guess in my now awareness I should have been. And so we moved her to this new house, and I've moved here because it's so incredible. It's a magical place to live, and it inspires me every day. And I felt that the move would also support her in becoming more herself and more open and less fearful and anxiety ridden. Well, what happened in the first month or so of her moving in with us was there was huge anxiety. She felt really unsettled, and she would scream constantly, and it was full on. It was really intense. For me, I would just have huge trigger points, I guess, and I would feel like I had no control, I had no peace. This place that I'd moved to experience peace was not peaceful a lot of the time, because I was so stressed about why she was stressed, and I tried to calm her down. The only thing that really would calm her down is if she would sit on my lap and sit with me for hours and hours, which is just also not feasible because for me, you know, I want to live a free life. I want to move around. I had this, you know, huge fear that I had my freedom limited, and it was exacerbated and perpetuated by the situation. So one day when I was feeling particularly overwhelmed, and I also had to look after next door neighbor's bird, so it was just the stress of taking care of two birds and one who had huge anxiety, and I felt anxiety. I had the podcast idea pop into my mind called Slavery and Attachment, and I just thought, wow, that's really intriguing. Whenever these concepts popped into my head, I know now that it means that in the next few months I'll be learning about that idea and learning how I'm being influenced. And certainly for me, when I first had the idea, obviously I had this just, it was so interesting because it harks back to this historical idea of slavery and where we've come from as a civilization, and to have this concept that energetically, this is what I felt, energetically there's some part of that I contain within me, and some part of that is creating this this conversation, this experience that I was experiencing there, where I felt like a slave, or feeling controlled by my cockatoo, and her anxiety, and not feeling like I had the free life that I wanted. As I stepped forward over these next 2 months, I recognized and had thoughts pop into my head that really inform this episode. And so I'm going to run you through the things that I've learned. So I started to learn new ideas and new ways of seeing slavery. And I actually have to admit that it was difficult for me to get to the point of recording this episode, because I thought this is probably the most controversial of all the episodes that I've recorded, but I'll have to just speak from the place of my experience and truth, and from the ideas that were popping into my head and what they mean to me. So here are some thoughts. Slavery is an attitude. It's a belief and a set of beliefs conditioned into you that you are controlled by an outcome. It's a belief that everyone else's experience controls and conditions my own. So to hear that, and then to reference my experience, that I felt like I didn't have the freedom to be an artist. To me, what was important was to have a peaceful space, to have a space where I could make my art every day, and it's what I had basically worked so hard to receive. This beautiful house, which has an office, which has a space where I can be at peace and work on my art, which is my highest and most important thing. To feel like I didn't have the space to work on my art every day really was sapping my energy. And I didn't have energy or love left over, I felt like, to tend to her needs, because it was, I just felt like I had no space. I had no space to be myself. So her condition and her feeling of anxiety was in being reflected in me, that I felt controlled by her and I wasn't able to have the freedom that I wanted. I became aware that there are several aspects of my life where I feel this level of control. And to be honest, at the time, it was largely related to my cockatoo. It was also related to money. And in many ways, I decided as best as I could to see how her anxieties were reflecting my anxieties of money. And another thought occurred to me. The energetic addiction to money is a form of narcissistic abuse. So in many ways, as a society, the ways that we've learned that money controls us, well, that is a form of narcissistic abuse. In my experience, it's when you completely hand over your power meaning your sense of centeredness, your sense of control over your choices, your sense of choice in the first place, that you have a choice in the first place, is being handed over to something else. And your sense of freedom is being handed over to something else. And so for me, that largely has manifested in the idea of me handing over my freedom to money or to feeling financially controlled in some way. And these two areas of my life were sort of the heaviest parts of my life, where I felt still controlled in some way and still lacking in freedom in some way. I would just have these thoughts that, to be honest, at points got violent, and I would have things like, take me to another place where I won't even be there either. And I had huge anger because I felt like my cockatoo wasn't choosing her own freedom, and I was basically making her pain and her hurt about myself, when what I was to learn was that my own freedom, my own choice to be free, creates their freedom. So the thought that popped into my mind was, your freedom creates their freedom. And this is where things started to shift and started to change for me. I had nothing to sort of lean on but my own personal experience. So I have a great animal communication friend who I contacted, and she did express that my cockatoo is in huge anxiety, but she felt helpless to communicate the importance of settling my cockatoo's anxiety. And so I got to a place where I really felt like there was nothing I could do. And that wasn't, that was until I really started to learn it's all about perspective, and it's all about a choice of how to see it, which I have learned a few times. And this was just a new opportunity to learn that it's all about the way I saw the situation. And from that place, where I started to learn of my perspective believing that she was controlling me in some way, that I had no control, that I had no freedom, well, I got to a place where it was learning that it was about seeing it. So I was scared that she was controlling me. And then I would have a thought, in life, it's just whether you feel controlled or not. It's just whether you feel controlled or not. How profound is that? To me, if you really sit with that, you can consider every aspect of our society and now run that statement. It's just whether you feel controlled or not. Do you feel controlled in this situation, or do you feel free? And you can know by the way your body is telling you, I feel open, I feel free, or I feel constricted and controlled by something, some external factor. And then I had the thought, believing in slavery is more important than boundaries. So this is a subtle one, because to actually interpret it, you have to first recognize the thoughts that you were thinking. As a reference point, I was thinking I was just hugely angry. I wasn't getting enough sleep because she would scream early in the morning. I felt like I wasn't able to do my daily activities, what I really wanted to do with my day. And so my thoughts would be really angry, and I would think, like maybe I should just give her back to where she came from, or just really give her away. I can't do this. I'm not set up for this. I'm not a mother. I'm really, so these were the thoughts. And so without me realizing it, by choosing to think these thoughts as opposed to allowing myself the space to choose a new perspective, or to see that I had choice, I was basically perpetuating the situation, because I was saying, I can't, I don't, I can't. And so therefore she could only match my vibration, and she could only show me that I couldn't, that I didn't, that I wasn't good enough. And it's been quite a process, and I had a lot of different ideas for how to resolve it. But I guess one of the things that came to me was to look into my dreams as a window to my subconscious. And so I had the idea to start taking a nightly diary where I tune in to her frequency and I translate it. So for me, visuals are quite easy to receive. So I will tune in to her, and then I will see an image in my mind, or I will see some words. And so I would draw that and then tune into it and ask, what does this mean, or what is this about? So I would, for example, see like a circle and there would be a huge cross through it or something like that, some sort of vision like that. And then I would ask, what does this mean? And I would see that it was related to this idea of her not feeling stable or feeling brokenhearted or feeling at a loss. And amazingly, I saw how these images that I was seeing that were related to her and her feelings were so much also related to aspects of my life and ways that I also felt. So I was getting this huge education by tapping into that subconscious layer of what was really going on, as well as really listening to my dreams. I would have different dreams. I can't remember them specifically, but I do have, dreams of feeling controlled or feeling out of whack. And I would, if they were relevant, write down the dreams, but largely it was about this nightly practice of tuning in to her and writing a diary of progress, and also seeing the parts of the day where she was most stressed and tuning in to those parts of the day and finding out why she was feeling that way. So tuning into, one of the cool revelatory things that came to me was that, so where we live now, there is so much bird life. It's like living in a retreat center. And I find it very calming and very stunning and beautiful, and it excites me and it brings me joy. But when I tuned into her frequency, what I felt was this feeling that she was putting all her energy out to all the birds, or like really paying attention to everything that they were doing, and that they had some sort of control over her, so that she was kind of losing her sense of self, which was quite an advanced thing for me. I felt, having come from a place where I didn't even feel like you could talk to animals, to getting to a place of feeling like I could intimately tune into her energy and get an understanding of what really was happening. And so I began the steps to clarity, and each day, based on the information that I would get, I would ask what I could do or what habits I could change to help her to feel more safety. And ultimately, what I discovered is that it was my judgment of the situation that caused me to feel like I was waiting for something to be better, like I was waiting for peace. And ultimately realizing I just want to be right here without fear or judgment. That is the dream, to be right here where I'm standing without fear or judgment. And from that place were the answers that I need, and the little steps that I could take on a daily basis to transform the situation. Even though initially I felt like I had no control over it because it's not me. And that's the irony of it, right? It is me. At some level, it is me, and I'm contributing to it. And what came to me was that at every step of the way, just ask. So I wouldn't know the answer, but I would pray for the answer. So when I say the word pray, what I would be asking basically. So I would sit, and she would be screaming and I would be borderline crying. And then I said, I pray that I feel peace in my body. I pray that she feels peace in her body. I pray that I feel this peace. And I repeated that for a while until I was able to step away. And in this particular moment, when I had, initially been feeling huge anxiety, I felt this change. We were in the kitchen. I was with my housemate and she was there. And initially I felt this huge anxiety, about her screaming. And then after this prayer, it was about 5 minutes after this prayer, I honestly felt like an energetic shift. And I felt myself pull out from the situation. It was like I could suddenly see that I wasn't her situation, I wasn't her anxiety, and I was able to just sit there and watch. And the ability to just sit there and be myself and be in my own peace and my own calmness and my own love is exactly what she needed to resolve, like to have a sense of guidance or to have a sense of structure, that to feel that there was someone in the room that felt that sense of peace and structure. And my housemate has actually been, who I interviewed in an earlier podcast, her name's Annika, tremendously helpful because she's worked with children her whole life, and she guided me every step of the way, through my anger and through my pain, to see the situation from her perspective, which was much lighter and much brighter and with so much more experience that things are okay and they will change and it's just temporary. And it's also just learning. It's about us having our pain points be raised up so that we can look at them really distinctly and clearly and transform them. And so the two of us, and as a household, we really did our best to make the choice that weekly we would sit down, or even bi-weekly sit down with this situation and tune in to ways that we could move forward. And so there was one particular morning that was so hard for me. She was screaming constantly, and I felt I could take no action to calm her or ease her pain. And I, in these situations, my housemate said, you just have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself first and get back into alignment with yourself first and come back to the situation. So I basically had to put her in the shower, like on top of the shower where she sits sometimes, and close the door, because that was the best thing I could think of at the time, to put her in a place where there was at least a sense of safety and she was enclosed in. And so it would just be about her working with her emotions. And then I left the house and I went to the beach, and I did the only thing I knew to do at the time, and it was meditation. And I meditated for 2 hours, but I fell asleep during the meditation. And that was because I was lacking in sleep, because I had been woken up so much by her screaming in the morning. And I had the idea as I was waking up to do a joint healing with my Cockatoo and myself and my friend Sammy. So Sammy, I have worked with as an energetic healer for so long, and I'll link her in the passage below. But she does pranic healing. It's exceptional, and I basically do it once every week or once every 2 weeks. She can do it remotely and heal my energy. Even though she lives far from me, she does it over the internet. And I had the idea that she could do a joint healing with my Cockatoo and myself. And for me, this is revolutionary, and it really did come from, I guess, my subconscious, or from left field, because I hadn't, it wasn't in my view until that moment, and when I fell asleep and I had the answer to take this next revelatory step. So although I was feeling huge anxiety, there was a sense of hope and renewal in me that I had a way to help her. And it was like so creative. It was a way that I have been healing myself, and here it was a way to support my Cockatoo as well as myself. And so that we did that healing, and there was a huge shift. The next day, she did feel a lot more at peace and a lot more at ease. We've only done, I've only asked for this twice on my Cockatoo, and then also I asked for just an individual session with her a couple of days ago because she was hugely anxious again. And it's 3 days in and she's totally settled. I used to not be able to leave her to her, just to play and to do her own thing. She would get so scared that I wasn't in sight, wasn't 2 meters away from her. But I've totally been doing my own thing the whole day, and she's also been settled downstairs in her cage or playing. It's my dream. I basically visioned that she would have freedom, and now are all the steps coming forward that are, the freedom in practice. And I'm also going to work with an animal behavior specialist, but I'm just blown away by the power of Sammy's modality and the ability to heal her from afar and to support this situation that I felt like I was way in over my head with, and to be at this side of things and to see that, I guess my higher self knew that at some level I'd get there, I'd get to the answer, and I already had the answer too. It was just a creative way of seeing the situation, and how much I have learned by going through the middle of it and by feeling empowered again and feeling like myself and feeling like I have the power of choice. So just to conclude, it's not who they are, it's just their energy at the time. And this idea came to me that it's really important, if you are in relationship with something or someone, or even parts of yourself, know that, and you feel a slave to it, or you feel controlled, or feel like overly attached. It's not who they are, it's not who you are, it's just their energy at the time or your energy at the time. And it's about people or yourself becoming slaves to your belief systems. And that's where this idea of attachment comes in. It's that I felt, and I felt it in my body, overly attached to the beliefs that I was out of control again, and that I had no way of changing this situation. And it was only when I started to truly shift my perspective moment by moment, day by day, little bit by little bit, that the revelatory solutions were able to come through. So it's a pattern of extreme poverty that I was participating in. This was profound to me, this idea of extreme poverty and extreme attachment, because as over the years I've been on my healing journey and I've detached and detached and detached from thoughts that would make me feel like I was controlled. I found the poverty of my experience, which was reflected in feeling judged or not having aligned work or feeling totally controlled by my mind, would leave and leave and leave and leave. And I learned this was another opportunity to not participate in the extreme poverty within myself, and to know that by shifting my perspective, I shift my reality. And so it has been. And it's just a state of being that I was in that she was reflecting. It was that feeling of distance, of pulling away from the now. To me, this is very, very beautiful. That huge depth of pain and longing and sort of that stretching out of energy, that elongation inside of us, that feeling like something is missing is, and it's, that piece is missing, I recognized was that I was pulling away from what was now. I was putting distance between, peace that's available now and saying that it was something that was in the future. And what actually hurts, what really hurts is that I put distance between myself and my peace. And it was a feeling that someone, believing in this feeling that someone else owned me, someone else owned my freedom. And this experience has given me the chance to see the parts of my life that this is, this plays out. And I want to say that this, it's an opportunity as well. And this episode is an opportunity to look at the parts of your life where this may be playing out for yourself. It's basically, these feelings are representing the things that we feel will never change. And basically the power is in working through them and doing what you can do in the moment. For me, that was meditating on the beach. It was having that insight. It was taking a diary every night. It's like, what can I do, as opposed to like, what can't I do? Well, she's destroying my freedom. No, she's not. I make a choice to see it from a new perspective and to step by step choose to do what I can do. I have the ability to tune into energy when I'm in a healthy space. I have the ability to go to the beach and meditate and receive answers. I have the ability to lean on my my housemate, who has the experience of working with, just years and years of experience of working with children to help me work through these heavier bits. So it's basically choosing that I believe this can change, and together we have the power to change this. I learned the potent and valuable lesson that when I gave love to myself, that meaning paying for the healings, paying to heal myself, because my fear is, I don't have enough money and like I can't just keep paying for healings all the time. But in paying for the healing, I got the outcome, like I received the ability of that payment of love to myself. And so, yeah, it's also about knowing that really it's just a state of mind and a state of focus. It's about focusing on the resolution. So this is absolutely a statement that I have carried with me through the heaviest parts. It's just focusing on the resolution, doing what I could do, and knowing there's an answer and a way. And sometimes not even knowing, but just choosing. I would even say things like, I feel afraid right now, but I pray to receive an answer, or I'm choosing to focus on the resolution, or I'm choosing to see, her freedom in my mind and my freedom in my mind. And I would constantly visualize that. And so the step-by-step answers would come forward. And now I am kind of astonished, because so much faster than I thought it would take. I thought it would take 6 months or a year, and perhaps there will still be much settling in. But for now, since these profound healings with Sammy, and some changes to our structure and consistency, and consistently communicating to her, showing her that she's safe and getting her new toys and things to play with, there has been a gigantic shift in her energy. She feels a lot more, generally a lot more settled in herself, a lot less attached to what all the other birds are doing and freaked out by them being around, and more present, I guess, and able to be with the things that are around her that she can play with and she can do. And what a lesson for us. What a lesson for us, eh? It's the very same thing. So that, that is today's episode. And like I said, this is a part of a 3-part series. So whilst hearing the phrase slavery and attachment sounds a little heavy, it's intentionally setting us up to show us all that there's a way out of this. And so the next 2 episodes go even deeper into moving out of this feeling of being a slave to our environment, a slave to our own energy, even a slave to concepts like money, or, and to ultimately, like, I see how insanely powerful this is as a world, because as everyone is choosing their own freedom again and recognizing slavery is an attitude, I recognize there are parts of this world where truly disturbing things occur. And I can't speak for the level of the circumstance. I can only speak from the level of my own experiences and my own circumstances. And I, having moved through psychosis, have experienced a pretty traumatizing circumstance where I felt death was the only option. And frequently that has reoccurred. But to know that even in such a circumstance where it seemed like my mind, which is the only thing I have to continue forward, was controlling me, and to see that even in my mind I had freedom to make a choice, and to see that being a slave to these thoughts that I was having or receiving, or these feelings that I was receiving, was a choice to feel differently, or a choice to choose differently, or a choice to pray for a different state. If I'm capable of doing that, I know that by getting these stories and these messages out there, that we can choose freedom, and we can choose to have a different attitude towards slavery. It's not indefinite. But it does take process, and it's about steps. And the steps are to choose that you have choice, choose that you are not controlled by the outside world, and choose that you have freedom. And even if that freedom is only available in some section or some part of your mind or your imagination, it's still there. And it just is about focusing on that element and about bringing it bigger and bigger and bigger until you start feeling it in more of your day, in more of your body, and then as a direct result in more of your environment, until so much of your life is really special and really spectacular, totally reflecting that freedom that you've chosen. And for me, where I'm sitting now looking out at this stunning view, it's only 3 years from when I was in a mental institution, and I didn't think I would be alive. So to see how incredibly my life has changed because I've chosen to see that I had freedom inside my body, well, yeah, it really is incredible. So thank you for joining me for this episode, and I really can't wait to share with you the new episodes of teaching and stories and storytelling, which will be coming out over the next few weeks. And this is also the first episode that I've recorded on video on YouTube. If you want to see the visuals of me doing the podcast, and I'll be recording them on video. At least I think I will be from now on. Just to get it up on YouTube. So thank you for joining me. If you'd like to check out more of the work of the Atlas, just check out the link below. This podcast is available on iTunes and also SoundCloud, and also the Atlas of Consciousness's website, which is the production company that I run. And it's just a real pleasure to have you here. And I look forward to seeing you again and seeing you in the next episode. Thank you.